As promised by several of our previous speakers, we do have Brainstorm in the room today. They're a major provider of and creator of virtual set technology and augmented reality. It's been interesting to listen to today because for so long news organizations really held back from virtual sets, but they seem to be warming up to that technology now. And so we have Ruben Ruiz here. Ruben
Hello.
is from, Ruben, and before I introduce him, let me just mention that Brainstorm is doing proof of concepts now for large network groups, news organizations here in the US. And it's very likely that in 2023, we'll see the first major station group adopt that technology. So Ruben is Vice President of Sales for the US and Canada at Brainstorm. Welcome back, Ruben.
Hi.
This is not your first time.
Kathy, you and I had a virtual experience. I'll clarify that. We were on virtual stage 2 years ago during the pandemic.
Pandemic induced.
And Kathy experienced her, she had a green screen and her very first green screen. And we actually were in set on a stage. I was in Austin, where I live, Austin, Texas, and she was in Pennsylvania from home. And she interviewed me, but we were on the same stage. There's some footage of that at some point we'll share. So that was fun.
Well, I experienced the extreme challenge of learning to work with augmented reality because it was bad. Ruben was much better at it than I am.
Well, you have to act, right? It's part of what you need to do when you're in a green environment. Teaching your talent to be able to be comfortable in a green environment or even LED these days is part of sort of the hurdle. So
it was challenging. I relate. So Ruben, I know you're going to show us some things, but tell me why now, all of a sudden, news organizations are having you do proof of concepts for virtual sets.
Yeah, so I mean, we've heard all of these panels during the last day today. It's been chock full of lab work where all of the tier one broadcasters are looking to have that flexibility to produce more, to create more, and I think virtual production is just another test for this for everyone. So we're working with a few organizations, and they're all kind of coming out of the woodwork, asking, how can we do it in a green environment, so that one, real estate is expensive, right? And you have a studio, and you need to repurpose it, and you need to make that sort of flexible. So multiple shows. There's good reasons to do it economically, but from the creative side, we're seeing that. It allows for more content and more interesting content and for better storytelling. And I think that's what we're seeing more of. And we do have an example or two. We kind of made this generic. This is part of the set that we're using for our POC, but we did make it generic, and we want to show this. That's a virtual set. Both of the actors have been digitally recorded. So they've actually been recorded in 3D, and we basically just placed Anthony behind a virtual desk. That's not a real desk. In the POC that we're currently doing, it's what you're seeing some augmented reality in a carousel format over the shoulder. He's a loop right now, so he'll be jittery a little bit, but the point is that he can be in a virtual environment and deliver a show. We actually have a couple more. So what you're seeing is, again, a 3D environment. This is an Unreal Engine set, okay? And so there's some augmented reality here. You really need to use your imagination here and place your own graphics and your own. But there's monitors, there's displays being used. You'll see her shadows, her reflections, and her interactivity with some of the augmented reality graphics that are popping up. And I think there's one more we're going to show. You see a big LED display back there as well. I mean, you can buy an LED. That's a way to do it, or you can have an LED display within an Unreal Engine set and deliver it that way as well. But here's a different format. This is a sort of sit-down environment where there's perhaps some couches. By the way, you can have furniture in this as well. This is not real furniture. This is actually virtual furniture. It looks pretty real, but it's not. But mixing the environment with either a desk, a real desk, or even real furniture where you're sitting down and placing a coffee mug, as I heard earlier, or a script or something like that is very useful.
So are news organizations taking a different approach to virtual sets? We see them a lot on sports programming.
That's right.
What's different in the way the news?
It's not very different. I think sports has always been a live environment that's really tested the boundaries, and I think that we've seen that with sports. In fact, I do have another clip I want to show you. I know it's late in the day, so we're going to be showing you a lot of video to keep everyone up and engaged. But for example, we have a clip of the BBC Sport in 2020. They actually delivered the Olympics from England to Tokyo Olympics, and let's run that because this speaks loudly about how it's being done. There's not that many differences. Is the point.
Welcome to the BBC Tokyo Olympic studio. Looks nice, doesn't it? We're going to give you a little tour of this technological masterpiece and try and show you how it all works.
Yeah, we're going to start here, though, on the main set. And by now, you'll be pretty familiar with how it looks on TV. This is one of the options that we do have, but here are some of the others.
You might have been watching us in the garden. Here we are, or the lower deck, as some posh people call it, with the fish swimming around in the pond beneath us. You can actually zoom in. Look at the crazy detail on these little fellas. There are quite a few of them down there. They are well fed and taken care of, fear not. And they, like us, have pretty impressive views of Tokyo.
We also have the option of presenting from this fabulous runway, where we can take a stroll along the rooftop pagoda with stunning views of this huge city, of course, the hosts of the 2020 Olympic Games.
Lots of people have assumed that we are actually live from Tokyo, but because of the pandemic, the obvious travel restrictions and the uncertainty which came with all that, we've done things slightly differently. So we are not in Japan. We are, in fact, in Salford. And this is what things really like when we turn Tokyo off. Ready?
Welcome to the Green Kingdom. So the whole studio is a green screen construction, and the only things that are real are the chairs, the wooden floor, and of course the metal tables.
We do get asked quite a bit about the design of the desks. They're actually made from folded steel, and they're inspired by origami. There's a little hollow down here and one down there where you can keep your snacks. And the BBC Sport logo at the front here is actually magnetic and removable. So welcome to BBC Port.
Right, shall we put the background back on?
Yeah, go on then.
Right, let's do it, because in fact, it is entirely virtual, which means we can adjust it depending on what time of day it is in Tokyo. So let's have a look at morning, shall we? There we go, nice and bright. We can do afternoon, or we can even go for a nice, soft evening colour.
Now, if you're a gamer, you might think it looks a little familiar. The set is rendered from the same engine which produces Fortnite, and the technology is impressive. We've got 5 cameras around us here at various points in the studio, and they're all fitted with infrared cameras on the top, which point up at a tracking system on the ceiling, which allows us to know exactly where each camera is in the studio.
Once you know where the cameras are, you can then create the stylized 3D images which are rendered in real time by an incredibly powerful graphics system. As the cameras move, the infrared cameras tell the graphics engine that they need to change perspective to look just right, as if it was being viewed from that point in the studio. So if we switch back to the green, you'll start to see that everything has to be masked. So wires are under the green sheets, and there are large wedges called Toblerones for obvious reasons, which do hide a multitude of sins.
If you look here, we can project a ghost image onto the green screen, which you can't see, but thankfully we can. And that's where you look when you're interviewing an athlete, so at least you're not staring into the green abyss.
But our cameras, all the operators and everyone else in the studio is hidden by virtual masking, so that when you see the whole studio on TV, everyone and everything is neatly tucked away.
But because everything has been incredibly carefully masked and marked out, there are certain things you can't do or places you can't go. For example, if I go this side, as you can see, I begin to disappear.
Now, one other thing to tell you is that you're not really allowed to wear white because it can reflect the keying and it looks very strange on camera. And also, green is a big no-no. So this is a green pen, and as you can imagine, I think wearing a green dress or a green shirt or green trousers would look very strange.
It would look a bit like this.
I like that. I like it, a floating head.
That's it. Thanks for taking a tour of the studio with us. I hope that's answered some of your questions.
Enjoy the rest of the Olympics.
We'll see most of you soon.
We were only going to show you part of that, but I'm glad we showed the whole thing. That was really interesting.
Because it is interesting. I mean, it brings it to life. And you see how excited they were? My experience with talent is that they're looking for something kind of challenging. They want to mix things up. And so this particular POC that we've been doing with the station group, we rehearsed a couple of times. So we did a whole run of a couple of blocks, A block, B block. And we rehearsed that maybe 3 times, 4 times. And the anchor and the presenter and the weather person, now really all on the same set, because you see the weather person was totally in his own world. He was teaching everybody else what to do, so he was the most excited because he had these augmented reality graphics popping up, and he was interacting with the environment very comfortably. But at the end of the day, everyone was, and we were able to deliver a proof of concept that showed a couple of blocks of news being delivered in a virtual environment where folks across the country were viewing it, couldn't tell it was an Unreal Engine set.
Yeah.
And of course, our software kind of runs Unreal under the hood. We have our own engine, and we consistently. I mean, this is technical, but what we're doing is our interface, because we've been in broadcast for 30 years. We can take any signal. We take all the SDI signals. We make the operation side pretty seamless. We plug right into a news infrastructure. So broadcast operations engineering, which is part of some of what we want to be talking about. And the graphics department really now just needs an extension of some skill set, right? I mean, that's the other part of this. Who's impacted, what skill sets are required, because there is a little bit of adjustment that needs to happen in order for this to all work.
So if I'm thinking about adding a virtual set to my organization, what do I need to think about?
Well, and I've heard panelists up here saying, well, we're kind of getting ready to do that, and they're working it. But I think that it's bringing engineering and broadcast operations, and then graphics, the graphics department in the mix. Also the news editorial side. Bringing them all as a team, bringing them together. You got to pick the right people to want to do this, because not everyone's going to be open to it. So you've got to set the right environment internally, culturally. You see how excited they were at the BBC Sport? Well, I've witnessed that. The organizations that are taking the step to actually make this happen are actually getting the teams in place to do that. There is some adjustments, but the talent, I find, are excited about wanting to do this. You'd think that they would be all, like, I'll use the word freaked out about having green. In the POC we're doing, there is a real desk. And when we ran the whole thing, the desk was the only thing that didn't look real, ironically. So, we're learning all of that, because there's certain materials you need to use that are not reflective, and, so.
What about, I noticed the BBC used the green screen, like lots of green screen.
Yeah, it's all
Why
green.
not video walls, where the walls are the monitor?
That too, I think the right balance of having both. LED walls are in great demand today, so you'll find that they're not as readily available. They're made overseas pretty much, and so there's some limitations there, but But I see environments having both. I see environments having, because what happens is you have the flexibility of green to bring people in and out. We've been doing a great deal of education about this. In fact, we wrote a comparison, a sort of a little white paper, LED versus chroma, and pros and cons of that along several categories like compositing and capture, right? Because there's all of these considerations, the technology piece and the operations piece, and post-production. You know, what happens is you're flipping the entire process. We're doing a lot of work up front on the graphics front. Pre-production is really key. Producing has always been key, right? But you know, there's a set of assets here that you didn't have before, right? Namely, creative environment that needs to be built. So we're holding hands right now, just bringing people along, bringing organizations along, and so their graphics departments need to grow a bit into the 3D world, AR, VR, XR world. So LED screens are being used. They're very popular these days, and so we plug into both. We're agnostic when it comes to that.
What about training? Training the designers, training the tech team, training the anchors? How much training is there needed?
Training is key. Training is always key. I think extending your current team's skill set. Some of them will want to level up to do some of this work. You know, I keep bringing up graphics, because the creators are really key to this. I mean, creators are going to be driving. These are tools to enable creators. This is the key to everything that's happened. This creator sort of economy that we're in, where people working from wherever, their flexibility is key, and they want the right tools to get this done. That's the group that I think needs to come along. Also on the engineering side, and working tightly to make people feel safe and certain about, we're going to plug into your infrastructure, you're going to be able to roll your video and you roll your packages. All we're doing is taking your SDI inputs and we're bringing them in and mapping them to a button. That's all we're doing. It's really seamless to us. And so we're doing that, and we're playing out video from whatever wall you create. You got a double box effect, over the shoulder, an LED wall. We can play to that. And with XR, it's a little bit more complex, because you're feeding a wall with background, and you're also looking at perhaps extending that wall for a virtual world that's beyond, you know, in a 360 way. And then, of course, you've got augmented reality that comes into play as well to you know, sort of compound things. But in the end, it's this very creative, very innovative delivery of a production.
I want to thank you again, Ruben.
Thank you, Kathy.
Head of Sales for US and Canada for Brainstorm.
Thank you.
See you again, maybe in a virtual world.